The fist came down like a thunderclap, not with a politician's flourish, but with the dead, heavy impact of betrayal. In the smoke-filled quiet of the cabinet war rooms, all eyes were on Winston Churchill. His face, usually a mask of bulldog defiance, was now contorted with a rage so pure it seemed to suck the very air from the room. He pointed a trembling finger at a single sheet of paper, a report filled with columns of stark, unforgiving numbers. "A liar," he growled, the word cutting through the haze. "We have a liar in our midst. A celebrated hero who has been feeding us fantasies while our boys die in the mud." The report didn't contain battlefield gossip or whispered rumors. It contained something far colder, far more damning. It held the secret numbers that proved one of World War II's most trusted generals was a fraud.
And this is the story of how a single, overlooked clerk, armed with nothing but an adding machine and a stubborn refusal to accept the official story, exposed a lie that nearly broke the Allied war effort in Italy. To understand the magnitude of this lie, you have to understand Italy in 1944. It wasn't the swift, triumphant march the public was told about. It was a nightmare. A brutal, inch-by-inch slog up a peninsula that the Germans had turned into a fortress. They called it the soft underbelly of Europe, but it was a backbone of granite. Every river crossing, every mountain pass, every stone village was a death trap. The weather was biblical, turning fields into impassable seas of mud. Morale was sinking faster than the supply trucks. The Allied command was under immense pressure from London and Washington. They needed a victory. They needed a breakthrough. They needed a hero, and they thought they had one. If you're finding this glimpse into the hidden pressures of war compelling, consider subscribing. We go beyond the headlines to find the stories that were never meant to be told. His name was General Alistair Thorne. To the press, he was a genius. To his men, he was a legend. To Churchill, he was the man who was going to win the Italian campaign. Thorne's dispatches were masterpieces of optimism. He painted a picture of an enemy on the ropes, starving, out of fuel, and ready to collapse. "One more push," his reports would say. "Just one final decisive blow, and the road to Rome will be open." He had a charisma that could charm a snake, and he used it to full effect in his briefings. He'd stride into headquarters, all confidence and swagger, and convince everyone that victory was not just possible, but imminent. He was selling a story everyone desperately wanted to believe. The problem was, it was a work of fiction. Miles away from the front, in a damp basement in Caserta that served as a records depot, Corporal Arthur Miller was fighting a different kind of war. His war was fought with paper, with ink, and with the relentless clatter of his adding machine. Miller wasn't a soldier in the traditional sense. Poor eyesight had kept him from the front lines. He was a numbers man, a former junior accountant who now found himself drowning in the endless tide of military bureaucracy. His job was to collate logistical reports, fuel consumption, ammunition expenditures, ration requests, casualty figures. It was mind-numbing, thankless work. He was a human spreadsheet, a cog in a machine so vast he couldn't possibly see the whole picture. Or so his superiors thought. It started with a single number, a tiny, insignificant detail that should have been lost in the noise. Miller was cross-referencing Allied fuel usage reports with intelligence summaries gleaned from captured enemy documents. It was routine. Check a box, move to the next. But then he saw it. A report from General Thorne's forward command estimated that a specific German panzer division had enough fuel for 48 hours of combat operations. but a captured quartermaster's note found on a dead German officer just days before detailed a recent delivery to that same division. A delivery of thousands of gallons of gasoline. Miller ran the calculation. It wasn't 48 hours. It was closer to a week, maybe more. He did what any good soldier would do. He reported it. He typed up a neat memo, attached the two conflicting documents, and took it to his superior, a major who had long since surrendered to the futility of paperwork. The major glanced at it, a flicker of annoyance in his eyes. "A typo, Corporal," he said, not even looking up. "The Jerry probably made a mistake, or our translator did, or you did. Do you have any idea how many pieces of paper cross my desk every day? We're fighting a war, not auditing a bank. File it and get back to work." Miller stood there for a moment, the memo feeling heavy in his hand. A typo. It could be a typo, but it didn't feel like one. The major's dismissal did something to Miller. It lit a fire, an accountant's stubborn, methodical fire. He couldn't let it go. That night, after everyone else had left, he went back to the archives. If there was one typo, maybe there were others. He started pulling reports, not just about fuel, but about everything. Ammunition, rations, medical supplies, troop strength estimates. He worked by the light of his single desk lamp, the clatter of his adding machine the only sound in the cavernous basement. He was looking for mistakes. What he started to find was a pattern. The discrepancies were all small, all individually deniable. A report on enemy ammunition that failed to account for a recently captured supply depot. An estimate of enemy food supplies that seemed to ignore local farm seizures. A casualty report that listed a German unit as decimated when radio intercepts suggested they had just been reinforced. Each one, on its own, was a simple error, a forgivable mistake in the fog of war. But when Miller laid them all out, a chilling picture emerged. The errors weren't random. They all skewed in the same direction. Every single one of them underestimated the enemy's strength and resilience. Every single report that went up the chain of command from General Thorne's headquarters painted a rosier picture than the raw data suggested. Miller finally understood. This wasn't a collection of mistakes. This was a narrative. General Thorne was telling a story. The story of a dying, broken enemy. A story that High Command, that Churchill, desperately wanted to hear. And he was bending the facts, just slightly, to fit his narrative. He was shaving a few hundred men off an enemy division here, underreporting a fuel convoy there. He wasn't fabricating victories out of whole cloth. That would be too obvious. He was just curating the truth. And the result was a grand deception. A lie so big and so pervasive that it had become the accepted reality for the entire Allied command. But why? Why would a general, a man responsible for thousands of lives, do this? Miller, sitting amidst his sea of paper, could only come to one conclusion. Ambition. Thorne wasn't just fighting the Germans. He was fighting for his place in the history books. A slow, grinding victory wouldn't get him a parade. A war of attrition wouldn't make him a household name. He needed a lightning strike, a dramatic, decisive breakthrough. He needed to be the man who broke the Gustav line, the man who liberated Rome. And to get the green light for the risky, audacious attacks he was planning, he needed to convince his superiors that the enemy was a paper tiger. He was gambling with the lives of his men, and he was stacking the deck with bad intelligence. Miller knew he couldn't go back to the major. He needed someone who understood intelligence, someone who understood that wars are won and lost on information. He took a risk. He gathered his 5 most damning examples and requested a meeting with a Captain Evans, a quiet, scholarly man in the intelligence analysis section. Miller expected to be dismissed again. Instead, Evans listened. For a full hour, he listened, asking sharp, probing questions. He checked Miller's math. He examined the source documents. He didn't say much, but Miller could see a growing storm in the older man's eyes. When Miller was finished, Evans leaned back in his chair and was silent for a long time. "Corporal," he finally said, "I think you found something terrible." Captain Evans knew they couldn't go through official channels. Questioning a celebrated general like Thorne was career suicide. It bordered on treason. They had to be absolutely certain. Using his own authority, Evans formed a secret two-man investigation. Him and Miller. They worked outside the normal duty roster, meeting in a locked records room late at night. Evans's security clearance opened doors that had been closed to Miller. They got access to signals intelligence, to decrypted Enigma messages, to reports from partisan spies operating behind enemy lines. They were building a second set of books. Thorne's official reality and the much darker, more dangerous reality they were uncovering. As their file grew thicker, Evans decided to test the waters. He presented a sanitized, anonymous version of their findings to his own commanding officer, a colonel who was a great admirer of General Thorne. The reaction was volcanic. The colonel accused Evans of defeatism, of undermining morale. "General Thorne is on the cusp of a great victory," he bellowed. "And you bring me this accountant's gossip? Are you trying to sabotage this offensive?" Evans retreated, but the meeting confirmed his fears. The system was designed to protect men like Thorne. The truth wasn't welcome if it contradicted the narrative of impending victory. They were on their own. The weight of what they knew began to crush Miller and Evans. Every morning they would see the casualty lists. They weren't just numbers to them anymore. They were the price of Thorne's lies. An attack on a hill that was supposed to be lightly defended met a wall of machine gun fire. A patrol sent into a village that was supposedly abandoned walked into an ambush. These weren't just the tragic accidents of war. They were the direct result of a commander sending his men into battle with a deliberately falsified map of the risks. Thorne's ambition wasn't just a character flaw. It was a weapon being used against his own troops. The breakthrough came from a source they never expected. A lucky shot from an Allied fighter plane had strafed a German staff car. The car crashed, and in the ensuing chaos, a group of Italian partisans recovered a briefcase from the wreck. Inside was a treasure trove of documents, including the personal ledger of a German divisional paymaster. It was the enemy's entire order of battle, not an estimate, but a detailed up-to-the-minute accounting of every man, every gun, and every vehicle in the sector. It was the Rosetta Stone they had been searching for. It was the unvarnished truth. In the locked room, Miller and Evans did their final, terrible accounting. They created a master document. In the left column, they put General Thorne's official estimates for enemy strength. In the right column, they put the actual numbers from the captured German ledger. Thorne's report: 80 tanks. German ledger: 150. Thorne's report: 25,000 effective troops. German ledger: 45,000. Thorne's report: critically low on artillery shells. German ledger: fully stocked with reserves. It went on and on, page after page. It wasn't just a discrepancy. It was a different reality, a different war entirely. Let's be clear about what this meant. General Thorne was planning to launch a major offensive, the final push, against an enemy he claimed was on the verge of collapse. But the numbers showed the truth. The enemy wasn't collapsing. They were dug in, well supplied, and almost twice as strong as Thorne reported. His offensive wouldn't be a breakthrough. It would be a massacre.
He was about to send thousands of men into the teeth of a buzzsaw he had to know was there. The lie had reached its final, murderous stage. Evans knew their report would be buried. The local command would never let it see the light of day. It would incriminate too many people, Thorne's protectors and enablers. He had to go over their heads. All of their heads. Evans had served with a man in North Africa who was now a senior official in MI6. It was the biggest risk of his career. Using a back-channel communication line, he sent a single coded message to London. Have urgent, eyes-only proof of strategic deception at highest level, Italian front. Imperative UC. Lives at stake. He had just lit a fuse and connected it directly to the heart of the British government. The response was swift and silent. A special courier was dispatched from London. Evans and Miller handed over their entire file, the culmination of weeks of secret work. They had no idea what would happen next. They had aimed a cannon at one of the most powerful men in the army, and they had no idea if it would fire or backfire. Days passed in agonizing silence. Then, one evening in London, as Churchill was preparing for a late-night strategy session, an aide brought him a single red folder marked with the highest possible security classification. Prime Minister's eyes only. And so we returned to that smoke-filled room, to the slam of a fist on the table. As Churchill read Miller's and Evans's report, his famous resolve hardened into a cold, diamond-hard fury. He wasn't just angry at the military implications, the near disaster of Thorne's planned offensive. He was offended by the lie itself. Churchill, a man who lived and breathed information, who demanded unvarnished truth from his commanders, had been treated like a fool. He had been sold a fantasy. The numbers didn't lie. 45,000 enemy troops, not 25,000. Double the fuel. Fully stocked artillery. It was all there, in black and white. A betrayal of trust so profound it shook the very foundations of the command structure. There was no public court-martial. There was no scandal in the newspapers. The war effort was too fragile for that. You couldn't tell the public that one of their greatest heroes was a fraud. The machine of war protected itself. General Alistair Thorne was quietly, unceremoniously relieved of his command. The official story, released to the press, was exhaustion. The strain of the campaign had taken its toll, and the general was being rotated home for a well-deserved rest. It was another lie, a final one, to cover all the others. Thorne vanished from the stage of the war, his glorious career ending not with a bang, but with a quiet, dismissive whisper. The immediate effect of Miller's report was the cancellation of Thorne's final push. Allied strategy in Italy shifted overnight. The new plans were more cautious, more realistic, based on the grim reality of the German paymaster's ledger, not the fantasy of Thorne's dispatches. No one can say for sure how many lives were saved. Thousands? Tens of thousands? How do you quantify a disaster that was averted? How do you count the ghosts of men who went home to their families instead of dying on the slopes of some forgotten Italian mountain? The only certainty is that a catastrophe was prevented, thanks to one man who believed in the truth of numbers. And what of the men who exposed the lie? Captain Evans was quietly promoted and transferred to a senior intelligence role in London. His career flourished, but he never spoke of the Thorne affair again. And Corporal Arthur Miller? He was promoted to sergeant. He was given a commendation for diligence and meritorious service. And then he was sent right back to his desk in the basement to continue his war against the endless columns of numbers. He received no public glory, no medals for valor. His only reward was the quiet knowledge of the lives he had saved, a secret he would have to carry for the rest of his life. It's easy to paint General Thorne as a simple villain, but the story is a bit more complex.
He was a product of a system that demanded victories and rewarded optimism. He likely started by bending the truth, not breaking it. A little positive spin here, a slightly hopeful interpretation there. But lies have a momentum of their own. Each small deception required a larger one to sustain it, until he had constructed a completely false reality. He was also enabled by those around him, by superiors who were victims of confirmation bias. They wanted to believe his good news, so they never questioned it too closely. Thorne's lie wasn't just his own. It was a shared delusion that everyone, from his immediate staff to the highest levels of government, had a stake in maintaining. The Thorne affair, while dramatic, was just one battle in a much larger secret war, the War of Intelligence. World War II was arguably the first conflict where information became as critical as ammunition. From the code breakers at Bletchley Park, who cracked the Enigma code, to Operation Mincemeat, which used a corpse to deceive the Germans about the invasion of Sicily, the entire war was a hall of mirrors. Both sides were constantly engaged in elaborate schemes to mislead and misinform their opponents. The unique tragedy of the Thorne affair is that this powerful weapon of deception was turned, not against the enemy, but against his own side, all in the service of one man's ego. This story also forces us to ask a difficult question about the nature of military command. What is the line between inspirational optimism and dangerous self-delusion? A great general must have unshakable self-belief. They must be able to inspire their troops to do the impossible. But they must also be tethered to reality. They must respect the cold, hard facts on the ground. Thorne's failure wasn't a failure of courage or charisma. It was a failure of character. He valued his own glory more than the lives of his men, and he believed his own story more than he believed the truth. It's a timeless lesson in leadership. The moment a leader becomes insulated from unwelcome facts, they become a danger to everyone they lead. Perhaps the most powerful lesson from this entire episode is the importance of the dissenting voice, the power of the individual who is willing to say, "Wait, this doesn't add up." The system was not designed to catch Thorne's lie. It was designed to perpetuate it. It took someone on the lowest rung of the ladder, someone completely outside the bubble of command, to see the truth. Miller had no power, no influence, no authority. All he had was a devotion to facts and a stubborn refusal to be ignored. It's a reminder that sometimes the most important person in the room isn't the general with the medals, but the quiet analyst in the corner who has done the math. A story like this doesn't just appear. For decades, it was buried in sealed archives. The official histories of the war made no mention of it. The truth only emerged years later, as historians began to sift through declassified intelligence files and the private papers of the men who were there. They found memos with cryptic notations, letters hinting at a great scandal, and eventually, fragments of the original report that Miller and Evans had compiled. Piecing it together was like detective work, slowly revealing the hidden story that the official record was designed to conceal. It's a testament to the fact that while truth can be buried, it rarely stays buried forever. And we shouldn't think of this as just a dusty piece of history. The dynamics of the Thorne affair are all around us today. We see it in corporations where employees are afraid to tell the CEO that his pet project is failing. We see it in governments where intelligence is tailored to fit a pre-existing policy. The pressure to deliver good news, the danger of confirmation bias, and the temptation for leaders to create their own reality are timeless human failings. The story of General Thorne is a 1940s case study in the kind of alternative facts and misinformation that we are all still grappling with in the 21st century. The history of any war is really two different stories. There is the official history, written by the victors, a clean narrative of heroes and villains, of strategy and triumph. Then there is the unwritten history, the messy, complicated, and often ugly truth known only by the people who were actually there. A history made up of stories like this one. Stories of fear, incompetence, and betrayal that are quietly erased from the record in the name of morale and national pride. But these stories are essential because they remind us that war is not the clean, heroic endeavor we see in movies. It is a deeply human affair, with all of humanity's flaws and frailties on full display. Let's return to Churchill for a moment. Imagine the burden of that knowledge. He was leading a global war, making decisions every day that would determine the fate of millions. And he had to do it knowing that some of the information he received from his own side could be dangerously false. His fury wasn't just about Thorne's personal betrayal. It was about the poisoning of the well. How could he trust any report from the field after this? The incident added another layer of doubt and uncertainty to a job that was already impossibly difficult. It underscores the immense, lonely pressure on a wartime leader who must constantly fight not just the enemy, but the fog of war itself. That German paymaster's ledger, the document that brought the whole house of cards crashing down, is more than just a historical artifact. It's a symbol of objective reality. In a conflict filled with propaganda, rhetoric, and lies, the ledger was just the truth. It didn't have an agenda. It wasn't trying to spin a narrative. It was just a simple, brutal accounting of the facts on the ground. It serves as a powerful reminder that no matter how much we might want to believe a certain story, reality always keeps its own set of books. And sooner or later, there's always an audit. It's worth taking a moment to consider what would have happened if Miller had just accepted the typo explanation. If Evans hadn't risked his career, Thorne's offensive would have gone forward. The Allied forces would have charged into a perfectly laid trap. The casualties would have been catastrophic. The Italian campaign, already a brutal slog, could have been set back by months, maybe longer. It might have become one of the great, infamous blunders of the war, spoken of in the same breath as Gallipoli or the Somme. And the world would never have known that it wasn't a blunder, but the result of a deliberate, calculated lie. History balances on such fine points. The story of General Thorne and Corporal Miller leaves us with an enduring question that is as relevant today as it was in 1944. Who do you trust? And what do you do when the official story doesn't match the facts? It's a question about the courage to challenge authority, the integrity to speak truth to power, and the intellectual honesty to question our own most cherished beliefs. Miller's journey from a humble clerk to the man who brought down a general is a powerful story about the moral responsibility that we all have, even in the smallest of roles, to be guardians of the truth. In the end, this entire sprawling story of war and deception comes down to simple arithmetic, addition and subtraction. The numbers on Thorne's reports versus the numbers in the German ledger. It was a battle between narrative and data, and for once, data won. It's a strange thought that the course of a major military campaign, the lives of thousands of men, could be altered by a few rolls of adding machine paper in a damp basement. But it's a testament to the fact that truth has a weight and a power all its own. And sometimes, the most powerful weapon in the world isn't a bomb or a tank. It's a single, undeniable fact. The lie of General Thorne does not appear in most history books. His name has been largely forgotten, replaced by the names of other, more successful commanders. Sergeant Miller's name was never in them to begin with. But the echoes of the story remain. They exist in the archives, in the declassified files, and in the quiet understanding among military historians that the official record is never the full picture.
It's a ghost story that haunts the official narrative of the war, a quiet reminder of how close the Allies came to a self-inflicted disaster and how thin the line between victory and defeat truly is. The Second World War was a conflict fought on many fronts: the Eastern Front, the Western Front, the war in the Pacific. But underlying all of them was another constant battle: the war on truth. It was a war fought with propaganda, with censorship, with deception, and, as we have seen, with outright lies. The fury of Churchill was the fury of a man who understood that if you lose the war on truth, you will eventually lose the war on the battlefield. The secret numbers that exposed General Thorne were more than just a piece of intelligence. They were a victory in that other, quieter war. A victory for the stubborn, inconvenient, and ultimately life-saving power of the facts. What do you think is the most dangerous kind of lie? A lie told to the enemy, or a lie told to your own side? Let me know your thoughts in the comments below.